you again.
Hi, Monica. I hope you can
Hi,
see
nice
us
to
and
see
hear
you.
us. Yeah, wonderful. How are you today?
Yeah, all good.
Now, I think during our prep talk, you really started with a fascinating story from London. And I would really love to start with that because sometimes it's kind of difficult for people to understand. It sounds like a cliche when you tell them we're all different, we have different needs, so what? Everyone knows that. It's something that can be taken for granted. But to make it more tangible, we sometimes have those stories from our lives that make it so much easier to imagine. Can we start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I shared a story with you about the time I moved to London, the first time I moved to London. So I moved to Southeast London, which is one of the most diverse places in London and truly representative of how diverse this great city is. Um, so every morning I took the bus from where I lived in Southeast London to go to work. And it was much cheaper as a trainee. It was much cheaper to take the bus. It was a 1 hour and a half trip. So when I got on that bus, the entire world was on that bus. There were people from Africa, from Asia, Muslim people, Jewish people, Eastern European immigrants, pretty much everyone. It was like a mini UN on that bus. However, the closer and closer I got to Canary Wharf, which is a bit like the Wall Street of London, and where all the nice jobs are, basically, the whiter and whiter that bus got. It got posher, it became more British. By the time I got to Canary Wharf, that bus looked completely different from when I got on the bus. And it was so eye-opening to me because it showed that we may all start at the same destination, at the same starting point, but we don't all get to the same destination. And it was really how the world and the UK works, right? Um, so yeah, many years later, I bet that if I took the bus right now to get to Canary Wharf from Southeast London, it will be the same situation, and nothing much, unfortunately, has changed. So we do really need to make a lot more effort to make sure everyone has the same chance to get those great opportunities.
Thank you very much. And for context, Monica, I think not everyone has been to London or worked in London. It takes what, like 90 minutes or so for this journey? So it's not that every bus
Yes,
stop,
an hour and a half
an hour and
on
a
a good
half.
day,
But
especially
I
at
think
rush hour.
yeah, exactly. I think this story is very relatable because, of course, it's linked to your social status, your wealth, your job opportunities, but it also shows the real world we live in and how it reflects on diversity and inclusion as we look at it. We are using the metaphor of a flavor here, and we all know in cooking, not all ingredients harmonize with each other. So it's a careful game, if you like. If you're good at cooking, you understand the influence that different shades of taste have one on the other. Now, could we try and translate it to introducing D&I solutions for companies? Now, if you were to think of unique ingredients that really matter in this conversation, what would be your first thoughts?
So I think some of the base ingredients that you need to have is, first of all, data. And we're lucky that in Europe and the US, there's a lot of data that we can collect. And also globally, you can collect information on gender, age, and nationality. So that gives you such useful information in terms of understanding where you are. Like, what's your base? Where are you now? And help you sort of plan for the future. So
Monica,
data is one thing.
can we make
Yeah.
it a little more specific? Imagine you're a well-intentioned manager walking in the fog with the best of intentions. What kind of data do I start with if I want to avoid all kinds of blunders?
Yes. So first of all, workforce representation. You need to know For instance, from a gender perspective, what percentage of your workforce is represented by women, and then looking at your leadership level as well. So, do all women make it to the top? Are they able to climb that ladder? Yes or no? If not, where are the dropping points? Where are they actually falling off that ladder? So, data can help you with that. So that's workforce representation. Then there's also inclusion data, which is really important. So that's about how people feel about working for your organization. What's their experience there? And then ideally, you would look at this data by diversity strand. So again, are people with disabilities having the same experience in your organization as people that don't have a disability? What's their well-being levels? Do they all feel like the same, like they have the same chances of being promoted in the organization? The other data that would be really useful to look at is your performance reviews data. So at the end of the year, you get your score. All your line managers will put in their score in your HR system. So it's really important that you do an equality analysis to see if everyone has sort of the same chance of getting, that high performance score. And what you will see in a lot of organizations, for instance, is that women do tend to have better performance scores than men. Not by a lot, but they tend to have better performance scores. So then the next step is, okay, we know that women are performing slightly better than men. Are they actually having the same chance of being promoted as the men? So it's also really important to look at those promotion rates and do they match? If you're a good performer, you should have a really good chance of being promoted, right? And if not, why is that? So there's all sorts of data that you can look at to make sure you have equitable workplaces where everyone has the same chance to succeed and everyone has an experience where they can thrive.
Only last week, I quoted The Economist article talking about obesity pay gap. It's 2023. We are sending vehicles to, well, car-sized vehicles to Mars, and we're talking about pay gap based on obesity. So obviously, the inequality is still there, even though much as we would like to think it's not. But then again, when you look at the cynical voices in this conversation, they will tell you that this push for equality, which shouldn't be even the case, is mostly there for leadership roles, for impact roles, where physical activity is there is no conversation, it's male-dominated, primarily for biological reasons, but the conversation is not there. But this is the cynical audience of this conversation, isn't it? So perhaps what Monica is telling us, that it really takes a lot of data processing and understanding, but there are different subtleties so that your cooking, your D&I cooking is not fast food, but slow cooking with in-depth understanding. Now, how do we avoid this, again, fast food approach to DEI? The push of the outside world, the generic approach, do something, even before you understand what you should do.
Yes, and that's a real danger when you do D&I work because you can do so much when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and everybody has an idea, and everybody can come to you like, I want to do something on this, or we should do something on that. But really, what you should be doing is taking a hard look at what's actually needed for your organization and not be distracted by flashy things. So one of what I've seen with some organizations is a lot of sponsorships and events, which are really amazing, but they are only one part of what should be your strategy. If you're just doing events and trainings, and you're not actually collecting data, you don't actually have policies in place that are really meaningful, if you don't actually think about embedding diversity and inclusion in everything that you do, and where everyone has that D&I lens and apply it to their work, then you're not going to get far. Everybody should be thinking about how they should apply D&I in their work, whether they are in events or comms or procurement or IT. everyone has a role to play, and it's not just about recruiting the best people or having a culture that is really great, but it's about making sure that you serve your clients and recognize that clients and customers come from diverse backgrounds.
Monica, let's attempt a tough challenge here of customization. We know that D&I is not a one-size-fits-all situation. That far, I think, repeats every year at every conference. We know it. But how do you customize based on what? Because the moment the word you should appears in the conversation, you're bound to have resistance. Or at least you assume people actually understand why they should and can genuinely relate to that as something that's from within, not an outside force, so to say. So how do you customize? How do you avoid this risk of following the fashion and really make it company specific?
Yes. I always advise anyone who is responsible for D&I and crafting a D&I strategy to not just go and like present and come up with the strategy on their own and just present it to the business. Just like when you go to a restaurant, you don't just serve the food to people. You first need to understand what are they craving for? What are their sort of dietary requirements and allergies, right? How hungry are they? So based on that, like thinking about that analogy, you have to spend some time understanding the business, how they operate, the culture in the business, their priorities, the wider context as well, the industry you're in. Because otherwise, it might be you might come up with a strategy or with an action plan that is really generic, it's not really fit for purpose for your organization, and it's not really going to help you get where you need to get. So spend the time understanding what your stakeholders want from you before you actually come up with solutions.
Can we, Monica, try and translate it to specific tools and measures? Because our next guest from Franklin Templeton will be talking about how global the landscape is. So you cannot physically meet people in every region, in every country your company is present in. So the bigger the company, the more complex the concept of developing some rudimentary understanding of what your D&I is all about or your DI is all about. So what tools would you advise would be the best ones, the most effective ones in processing all this data?
I think the danger with being in a big corporation is that the headquarter would influence whatever the local offices want to do. So my recommendation would be to come up with a framework in terms of diversity and inclusion with certain pillars that you want to focus on. So it can be, as an organization, wherever you may be, we want to focus on people practices, embedding D&I in procurement, supporting the community around us. But then when you go to the local offices, that needs to be translated to make sense to them, right? And to give you an example from our organization at Lloyd's, we are based in the UK. Most of our employees are based in the UK. So
Lucky
I do
you
think,
in that respect.
Yeah, so
makes the job a lot easier, I suppose.
Yes, but that means there is also a danger of us implementing actions that not really relatable for people in China, for instance, or Singapore, or Brussels even, which is much closer. So you need to spend the time talking to them and see how that framework translates on the ground in a way that makes sense to them. So that's one thing. So one size does not fit all, as you said earlier.
Fair enough, to avoid a situation where I'm the troublemaker in this entire setup and the good cop, the bad cop situation. We have a question from the audience.
Okay.
Basia, question number 3. Would you kindly read this out?
Okay. Are you seeing this, Monica, or is it just us seeing?
I can't say it, no.
Yeah. Okay. And
Surprise, surprise.
First of all, I wanna thank you for bringing out the subject of time and developing patience to look for data, study data, analyze data, and work with other people on the data, which takes time. We cannot, be impatient with this if we want to be successful and if we want to be developing a balanced diet for inclusion. So we need to learn to be patient. The question from the audience is it even legal to collect sensitive data such as sexual orientation, health data of employees? What's your take on that? Is it proper? Is it legal?
Yes, so it depends where you are in the world. So in the UK and in the US, you can collect loads of data. So you can collect data on ethnicity, disability, gender, sexual orientation, caring responsibilities, veteran status, social mobility. So all of that stuff you can collect in the US and the UK. In Europe, it depends. So in Belgium, for instance, you can't collect ethnicity data. In other parts of the world, it's actually dangerous to collect sexual orientation data. So you really have to talk to your legal team, preferably in the local area, to understand what specific things you can collect. So I wish I could give you a simple answer and say yes, you can collect sexual orientation everywhere in the world, but that's not really the case. What you can usually collect globally, so sort of no matter where you are, is data on gender, age, and nationality. That you should be able to collect pretty much everywhere.
If data is not simple, and evidently it's not, I think the simple solution would be just encouraging people to talk to your colleagues' departments, just get some advice. What is doable, legal, possible, whatever. And it takes time, okay? So patience there as well.
Monica Stanku, Lloyds, that's all we have time for. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.